I thought I was too old for love until he changed everything. For years, I had settled into the rhythm of a life that no longer surprised me. My name is Laura Mitchell, and at 47, I had convinced myself that love wasn't meant for me anymore. My marriage to David had ended nearly a decade ago, after years of silence that stretched wider than any argument. It wasn't bitter, it just faded until there was nothing left to hold on to. By the time the divorce papers were signed, I wasn't heartbroken, just empty. I poured myself into work, into raising my children, into pretending I didn't care when Valentine's Day came and went, or when I saw couples holding hands at the park. My daughter, Emily, was 24 and living in Chicago, chasing her career in graphic design. My son, Jacob, had just turned 21, a college junior who only called me when he needed money or to assure me he was alive. I loved them more than anything, but they didn't need me anymore the way they once did. That left me with long evenings, a quiet house, and a heart that had forgotten what it felt like to race. The night I met him was unremarkable at first. Our small town hosted an annual community fundraiser, a mix of food stalls, local music, and charity drives. I volunteered at the registration table, something I did more out of habit than passion. I liked to stay busy. It kept me from noticing how lonely I sometimes felt. That's when Ryan Carter walked in. I noticed him immediately, not because he was the most handsome man in the room, though he was, but because he carried himself with a kind of effortless confidence. His dark hair was slightly messy, his hazel eyes sharp but warm, and he had a smile that seemed to linger longer than it should. He signed his name on the sheet, but instead of moving on, he leaned against the table with an easy grin. "You always volunteer here?" he asked. His voice was low, steady, the kind that made you pause without realizing it. "Most years," I said, glancing down at the clipboard, trying not to notice how his presence made the air feel different. "Good thing," he said, tapping the pen on the table. "Otherwise, I might not have had anyone interesting to talk to." I laughed, though it felt foreign, like laughter that had been tucked away for too long. "You don't know me. I could be incredibly boring." "Somehow, I don't believe that," he replied. "It was just small talk, the kind of exchange people have when they're being polite." That's what I told myself, at least. But then he lingered, asking about the fundraiser, about what I liked to do around town, about books and music. His questions weren't shallow, they were thoughtful, like he actually cared about the answers. When he finally moved on to join the rest of the event, I exhaled, realizing I had been holding my breath. I assumed that was it. A fleeting moment with a younger man who probably saw me as nothing more than a kind volunteer. But I was wrong. The next morning, I walked into the cafe on Main Street, the little place where I always got my coffee and sat by the window to read. Ryan was there. He waved like we were old friends. "Laura, right?" he asked, remembering my name without hesitation. "Yes," I said, surprised he even recalled it. "Mind if I join you?" I wanted to say no. I wanted to keep the safe, comfortable distance I had built between myself and anyone who might make me feel something again. But I nodded, and just like that, Ryan Carter sat across from me, sipping his coffee like it was the most natural thing in the world. Over the next few weeks, he kept appearing at the bookstore I loved, on the walking trail I frequented, at community events I never noticed him at before. Sometimes I wondered if it was coincidence, but eventually he admitted it wasn't. "I like talking to you," he said one evening as we walked in the park. The autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet, the sky painted with shades of orange and purple. "So, I make sure I get the chance." "Ryan, I hesitated. "You're younger. You should be spending your time with people who—" "Who what?" he interrupted gently. "Who don't have laugh lines. Who don't know what they want. Laura, I'm 35, not a kid. I'm not looking for someone's approval. I'm looking for this." I didn't know how to respond. No one had looked at me the way he did in years. Not with pity, not with indifference, but with admiration, curiosity, and something deeper I was afraid to name. We began to spend more time together. Long conversations over coffee, late-night phone calls where we told each other stories we hadn't shared with anyone else. He asked about my past, my regrets, my dreams. And for the first time, I admitted out loud that I had dreams still, that maybe I wasn't done with life just because I wasn't 20 anymore. The first time he reached for my hand was in the bookstore. We were sitting side by side, our shoulders brushing as we flipped through pages. His hand brushed against mine, tentative at first, then steady, fingers lacing with mine like it was the most natural thing in the world. My heart pounded, so hard I thought he might hear it. "Is this okay?" he whispered. I nodded, unable to find words. It wasn't just his touch that undid me. It was the permission it gave me to feel again, to believe again. But love never comes without fear. I found myself pulling back sometimes, convinced it couldn't last. I told him I was too old, that he'd regret choosing me, that someday he'd want someone who could give him more. Every time he shook his head. "Stop thinking of yourself as less," he said once, his voice firm but tender. "You don't even realize how much life you carry inside you. You've been dimming it, but it's there. I see it." That was when I began to believe him. The town whispered, of course. People noticed us together, and there were glances, comments about the age difference, about how I was lucky, or how he was probably just going through a phase. I almost let their voices get to me. But Ryan never flinched. He held my hand in public, smiled at me like I was the only person in the world, and made it clear he wasn't ashamed of us. And slowly I stopped being ashamed, too. The night he kissed me for the first time was at my front porch after he had walked me home. The stars were scattered across the sky, the air crisp with the promise of winter. He paused, searching my face, and then leaned in. His lips were soft, his touch careful, almost reverent. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming realization that I wasn't too old for this. I wasn't too old for love. Ryan didn't change who I was. He reminded me of who I had always been, a woman capable of passion, of laughter, of dreams. He gave me back the part of myself I thought was gone forever. Love, I realized, doesn't belong to the young. It belongs to the brave, to anyone willing to let their heart open again, no matter how many years have passed or how many scars remain. And that's how he changed everything.